Resign, Gavin Newsom. California deserves a leader who won't let it burn. Why Governor Gavin Newsom must resign. A record of failures from wildfires to mismanagement. Governor Gavin Newsom's leadership has faced significant challenges during his tenure. His administration has struggled with several critical issues affecting Californians. From the recent Los Angeles fire hydrant failures to ongoing problems with homelessness and housing, Newsom's governorship has been marked by a series of setbacks. The California Senate Republican caucus has highlighted 10 major failures under Newsom's leadership. These issues range from economic instability to problems with the state's energy policies and power grid. The governor's handling of public safety, education, and transportation infrastructure has also come under scrutiny. As Newsom approaches the final 2 years of his term, he faces a critical juncture. The governor must address these pressing concerns to improve the lives of Californians and secure his political legacy. The challenges ahead will test his ability to lead and implement effective solutions. Newsom's governorship has faced numerous challenges, including recent fire-related issues in Los Angeles. The California Senate Republican caucus has identified 10 major failures during Newsom's tenure. Newsom's final 2 years in office will be crucial for addressing key issues and shaping his political legacy. Gavin Newsom's time as governor has been marked by several major setbacks. His handling of crises, economic policies, and healthcare initiatives have faced harsh criticism. Newsom's response to recent disasters has drawn heavy fire. The devastating LA wildfires exposed glaring gaps in emergency preparedness. Critics slammed his slow mobilization of resources and lack of coordination with local officials. His COVID-19 policies also sparked backlash. Strict lockdowns crippled businesses, while his own flouting of rules at the French Laundry restaurant damaged public trust. Newsom's wildfire prevention efforts fell short too. Despite promises, fuel reduction targets were missed. This left forests vulnerable and communities at risk. California's economy has struggled under Newsom's watch. The state faces a massive budget deficit, raising doubts about fiscal management. His policies have been blamed for high taxes driving out businesses, rising living costs forcing families to leave, a growing wealth gap. Newsom's $20 billion spending on homelessness has failed to reduce the problem. Tent cities still crowd urban areas, frustrating residents and visitors alike. Newsom's healthcare promises have fallen flat. His pledge for universal coverage remains unfulfilled. The state's Medi-Cal system is overwhelmed, with long wait times and provider shortages. Mental health services are in crisis. Psychiatric bed numbers have dropped. Street homelessness, often linked to untreated mental illness, has surged. Drug addiction treatment programs lack funding and capacity. The opioid epidemic continues to claim lives across the state. Governor Newsom's leadership faltered during the recent Los Angeles fires. His administration's response revealed critical weaknesses in emergency preparedness and environmental policies. Communities suffered devastating losses while the state struggled to contain the blazes. The loss of water pressure in fire hydrants severely hampered firefighting efforts. This critical failure left firefighters without a crucial tool to combat the rapidly spreading flames. Newsom's administration was caught off guard by the severity of the situation. The state's emergency response teams were slow to mobilize, leaving local fire departments overwhelmed and under-resourced. Communication breakdowns between state and local agencies further complicated rescue and evacuation efforts. Many residents received conflicting information, leading to chaos and confusion in fire-threatened areas. Thousands of homes and businesses were destroyed, displacing countless families and disrupting livelihoods. The state's inadequate emergency housing plans left many fire victims struggling to find shelter. Local economies took a massive hit, with small businesses bearing the brunt of the destruction. Newsom's office failed to provide timely financial assistance, leaving affected communities to fend for themselves. The fires disproportionately impacted low-income neighborhoods, exposing inequalities in the state's disaster preparedness and response strategies. These communities now face a long and uncertain road to recovery. Newsom's environmental policies failed to address the root causes of California's increasing wildfire risks. Insufficient forest management practices allowed dangerous fuel buildup in fire-prone areas. The administration's climate change mitigation efforts proved inadequate in the face of extreme weather conditions. Powerful winds and prolonged drought created a perfect storm for the catastrophic fires. Newsom's push for renewable energy, while commendable, diverted resources from critical wildfire prevention measures. This imbalanced approach left the state vulnerable to the very disasters his policies aimed to prevent. California faces major economic challenges under Governor Newsom's leadership. Jobs are vanishing, housing costs are skyrocketing, and businesses are fleeing the state in droves. California's unemployment rate has soared above the national average. In 2024, it hit 6.5%, compared to just 3.8% nationwide. Thousands of workers have lost their jobs as companies downsize or relocate. Key industries like tech and manufacturing have been hit hard. The state's strict regulations and high taxes are driving away employers. New business formation has plummeted by 30% since Newsom took office. Young workers and recent graduates struggle to find good-paying jobs. Many are forced to leave California to jumpstart their careers elsewhere. California's housing crisis has intensified under Newsom. The median home price topped $800,000 in 2024, putting homeownership out of reach for most residents. Rent prices in major cities have increased by over 25% since 2019. Thousands face eviction as housing costs outpace wage growth. New housing construction has slowed dramatically. Strict zoning laws and environmental regulations make it nearly impossible to build affordable homes. The governor's policies have failed to address the root causes of the crisis. His promises to build more housing remain unfulfilled. California is hemorrhaging businesses at an alarming rate. Over 300 major companies have left the state since 2020. High taxes, burdensome regulations, and soaring operating costs are driving the exodus. Even longtime California stalwarts like Tesla and Oracle have moved their headquarters. Small businesses are shuttering at record rates. Mom-and-pop shops can't keep up with rising rents and labor costs. The loss of businesses has devastated local economies and tax bases. Many cities now struggle to fund basic services and infrastructure. Governor Newsom's energy policies have led to serious issues with California's electrical infrastructure and sustainable energy commitments. These failures have resulted in blackouts, skyrocketing costs, and unreliable power for millions of residents. California's power grid struggles under Newsom's leadership. The state has faced rolling blackouts due to insufficient capacity during peak demand. This exposes the fragility of the electrical system. Newsom's administration has failed to upgrade aging transmission lines and substations. These outdated components increase the risk of equipment failures and wildfires. The governor's policies have also driven up electricity costs for consumers. Californians now pay some of the highest rates in the nation. This burden falls heavily on low-income residents and businesses. Newsom's ambitious renewable energy goals have backfired. The rapid shift away from reliable baseload power sources has destabilized the grid. The state now relies heavily on intermittent solar and wind power. This dependence leaves Californians vulnerable when weather conditions are unfavorable. To compensate for renewable shortfalls, the state often imports dirty power from neighboring regions. This undermines Newsom's claimed environmental benefits. The governor's energy experiments could cost Californians dearly. Estimates suggest his policies may add an extra $830 per person annually to electricity bills. Governor Newsom has failed to address California's dire homelessness situation and housing affordability crisis. His lofty promises have fallen flat, leaving countless Californians struggling to find shelter and affordable homes. Homelessness in California has reached alarming levels under Newsom's watch. The state's homeless population surged to nearly 186,000 in 2024, a staggering increase from previous years. Newsom's strategies to expand care and shelter have proven ineffective. His executive orders and accountability measures for local governments have failed to produce tangible results. The governor's inability to tackle this crisis has left thousands of Californians living on the streets, in cars, and in makeshift camps. This failure not only impacts those experiencing homelessness, but also affects public safety and quality of life for all residents. Newsom's ambitious goal of developing 3.5 million new housing units by 2025 has fallen embarrassingly short. His administration has failed to spur the necessary construction to address the state's severe housing shortage. The lack of affordable housing options has forced many Californians to live in overcrowded conditions or leave the state entirely. Skyrocketing rents and home prices continue to outpace wage growth, pushing homeownership out of reach for countless families. Newsom's policies have done little to incentivize developers to build affordable housing. His inability to cut through red tape and streamline the construction process has exacerbated the crisis, leaving California's housing market in shambles. Governor Newsom's policies have failed to address rising crime and dwindling law enforcement resources in California. His approach has left communities vulnerable and police departments stretched thin. California has seen a surge in organized retail crime. Smash-and-grab robberies and car burglaries plague cities across the state. Newsom's response has been weak and ineffective. His plans to combat theft lack teeth. They don't give police the tools they need to stop criminals. Stores continue to close due to rampant shoplifting. Violent crime rates remain high in major cities. Many Californians feel unsafe in their own neighborhoods. The governor's policies have failed to make streets safer for families and businesses. Newsom's budget cuts have slashed funding for public safety. His latest proposal cuts nearly $200 million from law enforcement and courts. This includes $97 million cut from trial courts, $10 million cut from the Department of Justice. These cuts hurt police ability to fight crime. They leave courtrooms understaffed and overloaded. Cases pile up while criminals walk free. Training for officers has suffered too. With fewer resources, departments struggle to keep up with new challenges. This puts both police and the public at greater risk. California's education system faces major hurdles under Governor Newsom's leadership. Test scores are dropping and funding is not reaching students who need it most. These issues demand urgent attention and reform. California's test scores have declined alarmingly during Newsom's tenure. Math and reading proficiency rates plummeted, especially for disadvantaged students. The achievement gap between low-income and wealthy districts widened dramatically. Graduation rates dipped for the first time in years. Newsom's policies failed to improve teacher quality or retention. Many classrooms lack qualified instructors, hurting student outcomes. Newsom's budgets misallocated billions in education funds. Money intended for high-need students was diverted to other programs. Wealthy districts received disproportionate funding increases. Meanwhile, schools serving low-income areas struggled with inadequate resources. Newsom's cost-cutting measures hit vulnerable student populations hardest. Special education and English language learner programs saw deep cuts. His fiscal management left schools unprepared for economic downturns. Reserve funds were depleted, risking future financial instability. Governor Newsom's environmental policies have sparked fierce criticism. His actions on climate change and natural resource management have angered many Californians. Newsom's water projects face strong opposition due to their climate impact. Critics argue these plans ignore long-term environmental consequences. His wildfire prevention efforts also fall short. The recent Los Angeles fires exposed gaps in the state's readiness. Questions arose about whether more preventative measures could have been taken. Newsom's climate policies seem inconsistent. He promotes green initiatives while supporting projects that may harm the environment. This mixed approach frustrates both environmentalists and industry groups. Newsom's handling of water resources draws harsh criticism. Environmental advocates claim he's been more hostile to salmon and the Bay Delta than any governor in 40 years. His water policies align surprisingly closely with those of former President Trump. This unexpected similarity angers environmental groups. Newsom's approach to natural resource management appears to prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability. This stance contradicts his public image as an environmental champion. California's transportation system faces serious challenges. Roads are crumbling while public transit struggles to meet demands. These issues impact millions of residents daily. California's highways and roads are in bad shape. Potholes and cracks plague many major routes, causing damage to vehicles and safety risks. The state has a huge backlog of repairs that keeps growing. Governor Newsom promised to fix roads, but progress is slow. Many projects face long delays. Rural areas feel ignored as funds go to big cities. Drivers waste hours in traffic on poorly maintained freeways. The cost to fully repair California's roads is massive. Estimates reach into the billions. At the current pace, it could take decades to catch up on all needed fixes. California's public transit systems fall short of meeting rider needs. Buses and trains are often late, overcrowded, or don't run frequently enough. Many areas lack good transit options entirely. The high-speed rail project continues to face challenges. It's years behind schedule and way over budget. Critics say it may never fully connect San Francisco to Los Angeles as planned. Local transit agencies struggle with funding shortfalls. Service cuts force more people to drive, worsening traffic and pollution. California's car-centric culture remains hard to change without major transit improvements. Governor Newsom's handling of public health crises has faced significant criticism. His decisions during the COVID-19 pandemic and vaccine rollout have been called into question by many Californians. Newsom's COVID-19 response was marked by inconsistent policies. He imposed strict lockdowns that hurt small businesses and the economy. Many viewed his rules as arbitrary and unfair. The governor faced backlash for dining at an upscale restaurant while telling others to stay home. This incident damaged public trust in his leadership during the crisis. Newsom's school closure policies were criticized for lasting too long. Many parents felt their children's education suffered as a result. The initial vaccine rollout in California was slow and disorganized. Vulnerable populations struggled to access vaccines in the early stages. Newsom's vaccine distribution plan was criticized for being confusing and constantly changing. Many Californians found it difficult to navigate the system and secure appointments. Rural areas of the state often lagged behind in receiving vaccine supplies. This created disparities in vaccination rates across different regions of California. The governor's decision to cut public health funding after the pandemic raised concerns about future preparedness. Critics argue this move could leave California vulnerable to future health crises. Governor Newsom's tenure has been marked by controversies and criticized decisions. His handling of wildfires and other crises has drawn scrutiny from California residents. What significant missteps has Governor Gavin Newsom made during his tenure? Newsom has failed to address California's homeless crisis. The state's homeless population has grown under his watch. He imposed strict COVID-19 lockdowns while flouting his own rules. This sparked outrage when he dined maskless at an upscale restaurant. How has Governor Newsom's management of the LA fires been criticized? Critics argue Newsom's response to the LA fires was slow and inadequate. He failed to deploy enough firefighting resources in the critical early stages. Some say he downplayed the severity of the fires initially, losing precious time to contain the spread. In what ways has Governor Newsom's leadership been questioned with regards to California's wildfire crisis? Newsom's wildfire prevention efforts have fallen short. He exaggerated the amount of land treated to reduce fire risk by 690%. His administration cut the wildfire prevention budget by $150 million in 2020, despite severe drought conditions. What controversial decisions has Gavin Newsom made that affected Californian residents? Newsom signed a law mandating later school start times, disrupting family schedules. This move was criticized as government overreach. He approved the release of thousands of inmates early, raising public safety concerns. How has the California government under Newsom responded to the state's wildfire challenges? Newsom's administration has struggled to implement effective wildfire management strategies. Controlled burns and forest thinning efforts have lagged behind targets. The governor's focus on climate change has been criticized as insufficient to address immediate wildfire threats. What accountability does Governor Newsom face for the recent crisis in Los Angeles? Newsom faces growing calls for transparency. Critics demand an independent review of the state's fire response. Some Californians have pushed for a recall election. They cite Newsom's handling of wildfires as a key